Hey there, Cheesemeisters. Welcome back to the Peach Pod. That would have been, and we have some choices for this week, but let's go with Friends in Low Places by Garth Brooks. This was the song that Scott chose to play when David gave him the reins of the West Beverly radio station before he died, obviously. I am Jeff. Look, he was a jerk, okay? He was a stupid jerk who blew himself away. That's who he was. You don't know. You left early. You missed out on the fun part when he picked up a loaded gun and twirled it around like he was Wyatt Earp. You weren't there to see him goof up and shoot himself and bleed all over his mom's Persian rug. I don't care. No one gave a rat's ass about Scott until he died, and I was the worst one of all. He was my best friend and I dropped him. I pushed him away because he wasn't cool like you or Kelly or Steve. So they're looking at me. So what? They've been looking at me for days, Brandon. Oh, poor David. Is he going to be okay? I hope he hasn't cracked up yet. I can't even walk through the halls without someone in my face trying to cheer me up like they're my new best friend. Well, what about my old best friend? It doesn't matter what you write about him in that paper, Brandon. It doesn't matter what you say about someone once they're gone. What matters is how you treat them when they're still here. I guess you can quote me on that. And joining me on the other end of the internet is host.
I'm Leslie, and I don't owe him anything, and stop saying he was my boyfriend.
I like that you identified with Scott's fifth grade girlfriend.
You know what? And I wanted to give a shout out to my fifth grade boyfriend. Sorry I broke your heart, but you're married, so you're fine.
That's right. You made it through your 16th birthday.
Yeah, exactly. Scott. Thank God.
So this week, in case you haven't figured it out, we're talking about Season 2, Episode 14, The Next 50 Years. Original air date, November 7th, 1991. This is some sweeps month shit, everybody. This is an episode where stuff happens.
Oh my God.
So here's where I want to start with this episode. This was the first episode in a long line of episodes to come where I didn't want you to get spoiled.
Yes.
I wanted you to go into this as clean as possible because no one else got to. When they previewed this episode, and of course they did because it's sweeps and you want to get as many eyeballs on the episode as possible. Mm-hmm. So you give a tease, you want people to show up. So I remember quite vividly the next week on at the end of the Halloween episode. And one of the things they basically say is one of their own is going to die.
Yeah.
And so you come into it and you're expecting somebody to die. And that's not how the episode builds itself. Like, you don't know that Scott's going to go until he does. Like, until literally the second that he goes. But they tell you that it's going to happen in the episode, so you're just watching it for that. I wanted to see how it landed for someone who literally didn't even have that much of an idea of what was coming. So tell me what this was like for you watching this episode.
It was insane because I don't even know how to describe it. I just, imagine you're just living your life and someone is telling you, hey, you need to not read anything about this next part that you're going to go into. And it's like, okay, fine. Next 50 years sounds like a futuristic episode. Sounds cool to me. What could go wrong? And it starts with choir. And again, I'm like, I'm in my safe zone. This is fine. And, things are still going away. I'm starting to get hints, especially with Scott and the occasional Chekhov's gun reference. It's like, okay. And then he gets the gun out of the desk and I went, oh no. And I really thought he was actually going to get David. I didn't think David was going to die because I won't say I've had anything spoiled about David still being on, but I really had no idea that Scott was never.
beating the shit out of the desk. This is a desk beating moment, everybody.
Oh my god! And just again, David's reaction is, I mean, I was stunned, and I didn't think he was dead. I texted you and he's died. He's dead.
Yep. Yeah, and at that point, I just said "yep" because it was nothing else to spoil.
It almost, I mean, rightfully so, it kind of comes out of left field, but so would a teenager's death at that age.
Right. Sure.
That's redundant, but you know what I mean. Like, that's the time of your life you feel invincible. And yet, I would imagine a lot of us had either a classmate, I hope none of you all had a friend die in high school. I thankfully didn't, but we definitely had classmates die, and it was the strangest time in school when that happened.
I did have my best friend died, and we'll talk about that a little bit later because it's germane at least to my experience of this episode, but not kind of in the way that anyone would think. This isn't a downer episode at all.
Okay.
What is like? So I was just hoping you'd get here clean.
Yeah.
And in the first episode of season 2, when Scott is like showing David all the shit he brought back from Oklahoma, and you're like, what the fuck is with Scott and the guns? And I'm like, shit, did they tip their hand too much? Because I didn't like at the time I didn't clock that. In retrospect, after Scott died, I'm like, oh, and then I saw it like the second time through. I was like, oh, this is where they're setting it up, where they, no, now Scott's got a gun thing going on.
I think as a viewer in the year of the Spaghetti Monster 2024, and not even avid viewer of other teen dramas, but unfortunately because of everything we've witnessed with gun violence in recent years, unfortunately now, no pun intended, I'm like, there is a trigger when I see teens or anyone holding when I see teens on a show holding a gun or reference anything about a gun, my spidey senses are aflame. Like,
This is another one of those 90210 predicts the future things.
Oh,
because like, this was, we were watching this morning. And Laura said, when is this in relation to Columbine? And I said, before.
Way before.
Like, this is like 7 years before. 8 years? Something like that.
I had to look it up because Walter asked the same thing. Again, we're both watching this as younger people. And, like, we feel like we didn't really grow up. We grew up past Columbine, but pre everything else that has come from that. Because I feel like there are two different milestones in gun shooting history in this country. But like when I looked it up this morning, Columbine was in 99 and I thought, oh shit. So there's no wonder you all were like, didn't pick up on the gun thing.
Right. Yeah. Cause it wasn't, obviously gun violence is always a problem and has long been a problem, but in 1991, it was not the problem it is today and not the same way by a long shot.
Yeah.
So, like, there wasn't, I don't know, I guess I watched this episode the first time, if I could even remember that, like, wondering, is this who? Is this how it happened? What, like, for every scene,
Oh, no.
Because you're like, somebody's going to die in this episode. Who the hell is it? And then it's a lie, because it's not one of their own. It's fucking Scott.
I know.
They don't give a shit. Like, I think we should talk about it later, their reactions to it. But Dylan's reaction, I think, is one of the best ones. Where he's like, I don't want to be a dick, but which one was Scott? And when Brenda reminds him, like, he was in your tech class, that's when we met Dylan, right? Stepping up to protect Scott. Like, Scott was getting bullied for building his nightclub on the computer. And Dylan's reaction is, oh, that guy? Oh. Like, he didn't know this kid, but he knew him. And it's like, when he's reminded of who it is, it's like, fuck, that sucks. But this is not a one of your own situation. This is one of David's own, kinda. But almost everybody else is like, oh, that kid that is wearing a cowboy hat now? Like, I guess.
It's taking up half the hallway.
Right. It's hard to get around that cowboy hat.
Jesus.
So, I mean, we're already into it, but what this episode is about, what happens in this episode, is that it's the 50th anniversary of the burying of the time capsule after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And so there's big patriotic hoo-ha at the beginning of the episode. David is filming a whole bunch of David Silver behind the camera stuff, focused exclusively on the people in the show, by the way.
Right.
People go to this school. And Scott's mom, who sucks, comes up to David and is like, hey, it's Scott's birthday tomorrow or whatever in 3 days. We're having a surprise party. You invite the kids. Putting this whole fucking thing on David that he has to go deal with.
Yeah.
Donna, because is it clear to you yet that Donna has feelings for David?
Oh, very much so.
Because this episode is, I kind of love Donna in this episode.
Yes.
She goes out of her way to help get the other members of the gang to Scott's birthday party, even though for very obvious reasons nobody wants to go. Like,
yeah,
they don't know this kid, and he's not their kind of kid, really. You know, they don't have anything in common with him, and they're just going there to be nice to David, but kind of to be nice to Donna more than David. And at Scott's birthday party, he accidentally shoots himself and dies, which, you know, tough look for our guy Scott.
Oof.
The rest of the episode is what happens after. The grieving, the David processing, everybody processing, and then they build their own time capsule where Dylan puts surf wax in it.
Which will be unveiled or dug up in 17 years.
Yeah, we're so much closer to digging this time capsule up than they were to burying it, which is kind of upsetting to anyone who watched them bury it in real time. But here we are.
I understand your pain.
It's tough. It's a tough one. So, I mean, that's what happens in the episode. I guess we should probably talk about what this episode is really about.
Yeah.
And one of the things that this episode, well, let's see, what do you have that this episode is really about? Because I'm not sure which way to get into the things I'm thinking about.
I'll start with the most obvious thing, which I realize now in some reading that I did prior to this is maybe a little unfair on my part, but I think it's still true. This episode is about how no one wants to talk about guns.
Yeah.
Because they touch on it, and from what I've read, Charles Rosen had to fight tooth and nail to get them to even go along with this storyline.
That was my guess. Yeah.
Yeah. He based it off of an article he read about a kid getting shot and killed like on his graduation night.
Ugh, yeah.
So clearly this man had something to say, and you know, it's like any tough subject matter. You know, in 1991, I can see and I can forgive that they couldn't go more in depth with this. Mm-hmm. But like you said, they were predicting the future because we still aren't having more in-depth discussions about it, at least not in areas where it needs to be discussed.
Yeah. I didn't know that. Like I said, I didn't do any reading about this episode, but I knew that. Like, you can tell that, like, one, I think I've picked up on, like, Charles Rosen's sensibilities at this point. Not just from watching the show, but, like, you know, he does that other podcast, the Beverly Hills 90210 show, I think it's called. I might I might have elongated it in ways it doesn't need to be elongated. It might just be the 90210 show. I can't remember. But, and I've heard him talk about like his political bent and the things he wanted to address in a show like this. And so you see this and you go, he wanted to say a thing in this episode. And he is Andrea wanting to put out a screed against gun violence. And Brandon is the network saying, do we have to make this about guns? And I can't remember what episode it was before where we said this is clearly one character is taking the position of the network and another character is voicing their opposition to that bullshit.
It was the start of season 2, I believe, when Brenda and Jim are having a discussion about
her having sex. And then him walking in the other room and like, God, I feel like an asshole for even saying, yeah, that's what it was. You're right. I
love figuring out on TV shows where the network is talking or where the writers are telling us what they really think, because and Dawson's Creek is where I first started clocking that kind of thing. Because that is my 90210.
Sure.
In terms of addiction. But yeah, I love that stuff, and I agree. Like, he is Andrea, the network is Brandon, and that's about as much as we get. And for 91, that's the best we could hope for.
Yeah, and unfortunately, what it does is it takes so much of the weight out of this episode. Because, like, okay, they had clearly made a choice that Douglas Emerson was not going to be part of the main cast going forward. It just didn't make sense with the kind of show they were. Like, they'd already brought David in and were making him cool-ish. I think it's too hard. It's too big a lift to also bring Scott in and make him cool.
Yeah.
So he's not coming back as a series regular. What do you do with him? Well, we could use his death to talk about gun violence. Okay. So how does that play out? I mean, does he get shot in, I don't know, a robbery, whatever? School shootings were not really a thing on people's brains at that time. So I don't think that would have even come up as a suggestion.
See, but I totally thought he was going to bring a gun to school.
You did. You said that like in episode 1 of season 2. Yeah.
I was freaked out.
Sure. Well, understandably so. But like that just wasn't what this time period was. Like, we had bomb threats and nuclear bomb drills. We didn't have active shooter drills.
I had bomb threats too.
Yeah, and bomb threats were mostly just some asshole calling the fire department so that everybody else had to go outside.
Yeah.
It was a gag 99.9% of the time.
Yeah.
We didn't have this, we didn't have this active shooter bullshit that we have today. Nope. And so I didn't think that that's what was going to happen, but maybe the story is Scott feels so alone after being abandoned by his best friend and watching him move on and feeling deeply unpopular that he kills himself. That is a horrible fucking story.
Yeah.
That would hurt to watch. It hurts to talk about. Like, it hurts to posit that as a story idea.
But I think, I'm sorry to interrupt. I feel like we got glimpses of that, because you see his despair at his friend moving on.
Yeah.
And like sort of accepting it, also naturally feeling bad about it. And like, I even said to you, this feels sort of suicidal, even though it wasn't, but like I just wonder how much of what was happening made him feel like he needed to make a reckless choice.
Yeah, I mean, right. And I think the actual suicide story is a much more compelling story than like kid accidentally blows himself away at his own birthday party. Although that's super fucked up. Like when you say it like that, like that is such a mess of a sentence and thing to say. But it doesn't it because you don't know the family, because
Yeah.
you only kind of know Scott, because we're much more invested in all of the other characters who come in and are like, I gotta leave this party. This is lame. She wants us to limbo, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
Those are our POV characters. So, like, Scott dying like this is such a. It's like a. Just a balloon that gets let out, like. You know, it's not a grand thing. And that is to the detriment of the episode and the characters and the writers. And so thank you, studio, for giving us what this is, which is ridiculous.
Yeah. Really picky thing, but it keeps bothering me how, from a fight choreo standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't have any, other than like being an actor and holding a fake gun, I don't have any experience with telling people like, you know, how to hold this and how to deal with this or whatever. But it just seems like the way he killed himself, the ability to kill yourself accidentally by swinging the gun around that way,
Mm-hmm.
that's got to be some 0.0 type percentage, because like that's got to be less than 1%. That's just wild to me.
I mean, the twirling around like Wyatt Earp thing for sure.
Yes.
I do think the like accidental gun shootings are a huge problem.
No, for sure. I think it was just, again, the way they had him do it, and I get too, they might have had him do it that way because it was a real gun, and we're like,
right.
Just out of safety, do it off to the side, and it's like, well, find a fake one, have him do it more in front of himself.
Yeah.
Like, you can still do these things safely without causing harm to the actor, but it still needs to make sense. And so that's my nitpicky take on it. I don't discount, though, that you can actually die from, like, you know, doing it off to the side that way. I'm sure that has happened. It's just,
sure,
again, like you said, ridiculousness of the show.
It is. It just like the whole thing just becomes so silly. Like,
I mean, David's reaction is laughable. I'm sorry. How long they show him. I'm like, oh no.
Yeah. I mean, like you've got and you know, again, this is where I feel the Charles Rosen thumb on the scale. Starting this episode out with a choir singing a patriotic song called "This Is My Country."
Oh my God.
Is like, at first you're like, Jesus, what kind of like rah America bullshit is this? And then you go, oh, I get it. This is my country, where kids accidentally shoot themselves on their 16th birthday. Like, this is where that happens. And it, you know, it happens and it's worse, you know, moving forward.
And then it's interesting then to follow his death with the choir once again, but singing from West Side Story, a show about, you know, not just about gun violence, but like teen violence, racial violence. It's, you know, I hit on more themes than are relevant to this episode, but you get what I'm saying.
Not really. I mean, the racial part, yeah, sure. But I what we're seeing is how deep they had to layer the stuff they wanted to say.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, you know, being able to really put it out there. I do think one of the things that this episode is about, and there's sort of two that are interconnected, but it's about the way that people express how they feel.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also about the way that people experience grief. It's both of those things.
Yeah.
But they've, you know, like Donna is expressing her feelings for David through the entire episode by the way she's treating him, you know, by the way she's trying to help, by the way she does help, by the way she keeps checking in on him, you know, the way, and the way that she tells him not to be a dick anymore to her. Like the way
Thank
she
God.
stands up for herself and is like, you know what? This is not cool. You're being an asshole. I,
Mm-hmm.
I understand you're hurting, but don't treat me like this. I'm not a doormat. And like, super bravo for Donna.
Agreed.
But like, it's about Andrea not being able to tell Brandon how uncomfortable the Emily stuff makes her. And
Yeah.
and then how she finally does towards the end. And actually, I think like there's a little conversation between Andrea and Brandon right before David's monologue, where I think it's the thesis of the episode. Brandon says, "I feel bad that you feel bad. What can I do?"
Yeah.
And she says, "Nothing. Just be my friend." And that's really it. That's the whole thing, right? He doesn't. He feels bad that she feels bad. He doesn't. He's not going to stop doing what he's doing because like it's not his responsibility how she's reacting to the fact that he has a girlfriend. But he feels
Yeah.
bad because he likes her. He's her friend.
Yeah.
And that's everybody else in this episode after Scott dies. They feel bad that David feels bad. They don't know what to do. So they just keep asking him how he's doing. And I really kind of like the way that they did those two scenes walking down the hall where Scott is stopped like every other step and where someone's asking him
David.
how he's David. Yeah. The ghost of Scott is stopped every other step.
Scott's dead, baby.
Yeah, yes he is. His name is Zed. I picked up what you were putting down. Don't worry about it.
Oh, I know.
But I liked that the set of both of those scenes where he was just stopped, and you sort of felt how just shit that was. Like everyone was well intentioned, and they're all making it worse. And because
and get with the teachers. Well, you only get one teacher, but I was like, the teacher came up and I went, "Ooh, I have that moment." That's more overwhelming than the friends. But again,
right. And again,
yeah.
he's trying to help, but he doesn't know. Like you don't know how to talk to a teenager who is grieving the death of a friend.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you were a teenager grieving the death of a friend. And even then you don't know. You can just
Yeah.
you have a frame of reference, but it's not like they teach you that shit in principal school. You know, like that's the school counselor is available for more, you know, if you need it, like that's what you do.
On
That's
a
kind of what
grander
you can do.
scale, this is why I want to tell teens that I've worked with sometimes, like, this is why in film we need older actors playing your age, because you
Mm-hmm.
all haven't processed a lot of stuff. You don't
Right.
understand your motivations for these things yet. Maybe some of you do. Good for you. I'm very sorry because you have an emotional intelligence that I don't want you to have yet.
Right.
But yeah, like they are grieving. They're all grieving in the only way that they personally know how, which for a lot of them, they don't know. And again, with
Mm-hmm.
like someone who I'm still going to say loosely, they're friends with David, like they still
Mm-hmm.
tolerate him, you
A little
know?
bit, yeah. Like even at the beginning, Dylan's like, Silver, what have I told you about the camera?
Yeah. You know, they're all annoyed with him. Like, he's kind of like their lovable or annoying brother.
Right.
But yeah, so David rightfully gets mad at them for suddenly caring.
Yeah. And then you see like the way that I think Brandon and Emily are very interesting in this episode
Yes.
because they are maybe the most realistic teenagers possible. Because they show up to this lame party and immediately try to find someplace to go make out. And who cares if it's an 8-year-old's bedroom? Right?
Oh, God,
Like
so
they're
weird.
just it's weird, but it's normal. Like it's weird that it's
Yeah.
an 8-year-old's bedroom, but that like let's sneak off somewhere is like is there anything more relatable than that? You
They
know?
had to have just gone to the first room because,
Sure.
yeah, I can't imagine they put much thought into it, or it's getting into weird territory for me.
Oh yeah, yeah. They've got like this super weird kink about childhood bedrooms.
It's like, ooh, not the bathroom, that's gross. Ooh, not his parents, that's weird. But an 8-year-old bedroom? Zing.
Right, we nailed it. This is the
We
spot.
know nothing has happened in this room yet. This is an innocent room.
We're
Unlike
christening the
you
shit
two.
out of this.
Oh, God.
Yep. Oh, I just had a really horrible thought that I'm not going to say out loud, but people watching the show understand.
Oh, no!
So then,
Ah.
you like how I just laid that out there and just walked away from it?
Oh, my God.
Yeah, that's a big turd sandwich I just put in the middle of the table.
I no longer feel clean.
I apologize. And then later, Brandon and Emily are, like full on makeout session to the Bangles, which is awesome. It was In Your Room was playing when they were making out on the couch.
Nice.
Which is like a pretty kick-ass song. And Brandon is like, I feel really guilty about being alive. And which is like a really normal way to feel about something like this. And Emily's like, yeah, but you are. And we both are. And we shouldn't not be just because he isn't.
I know what I want to do before I die.
Right.
Parentheses, you.
Bedroom.
I just hope they made it upstairs to Brandon's room and didn't ruin Cindy's couch.
Well, yeah. I mean, and Jim has a tendency to walk in when people are making out on that couch. So
it's like he's got an alert.
He does. Yeah. He's got motion. He's got like one of those nanny cams in a teddy bear on the mantle.
Yeah.
He just knows anytime someone's making out in there, time to go in.
That's what those portraits covering the books are for.
They're hiding a lot of cameras.
Yes. Oh, God.
Yeah, because Jim wants full coverage. He wants to be able. Jim wants to be able to make some choices in editing, and so he needs lots of angles. It's not a direction I expected to go with this episode, and I kind of like it. Yeah, no, I'm big fans of that. So and then later Brandon is like trying to study and can't focus, and it. And here's what I want to sort of say about all of that stuff, because I think it's the only useful thing I can tell anyone who's grieving.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this. Everyone gets to do this their own way.
Yeah.
Your grieving process is yours, and there's no right or wrong way to do it. Whatever you're feeling in that moment, feel it. If you're happy, if you're sad, if you're horny, if you want to scream at somebody, if you want to be left alone, if you want to be in a big crowd of people, if you want to put pictures of your friend all over your locker, if you want to put all those pictures in a box, if you want to go to his mom's house and take something home, or if you don't want to ever think about something like that again, all of it's fine. Mm-hmm. Because it's the way you feel. It's when we start judging our reactions that the grieving process gets really, really complicated. When you start thinking, I shouldn't be laughing. Yeah, you should, because sometimes shit is funny. Even in tragic circumstances, sometimes things are funny, and it's okay. And I think that they try to do that here by showing all of the different people grieving in all of their different ways. Mm-hmm. And I think, like, Andrea and Brandon are real weird about this insert. But as you said, like, Andrea throws herself into work. That's how she feels, and that's cool. I think that they're imposing their shit on David, which isn't so cool.
No, it's not.
Like, forcing him to do this on their timeline sucks as people. It's not cool.
It really shows how Go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, it really shows how in a high school setting, when something that big and dramatic happens, everyone takes it on as their own personal thing. And Dawson's Creek kind of jabs at that a lot
Hmm.
more. Like, you all didn't even like this person.
Right.
But
And
anyway,
like that's totally real
yeah,
because it is for everyone their own personal experience. Um, so I mentioned at the top that like when you brought it up, like that uh, my best friend died when I was 18. It was 30 years ago, like this year.
mm,
Not by gun violence, but by his own choice. And I was away at college and processing, and I really don't want to get into the whole thing, but
sure,
um, but only to say that like I like the Scott's hat thing is interesting to me because I did that. It took longer. It took longer for me to go to his house and talk to his mom. And, but that was, and she was so wonderful and accepting of me and, my need to talk. And, she wanted me to have things if I wanted them. And what I took was a hat and a pair of glasses that
mm.
he used to wear that were they were very much Rob Morrow Northern Exposure inspired hatwear, and that's what I took. I took his hat, and this was like I said 30 years ago, so it's after the Scott thing. I was not in any way thinking about David and fucking Scott. Like
Yeah,
let's be real clear about that. This episode didn't live inside my heart. It wasn't like now I recognize what David was going. No, it's not. This like 90210 is a silly program, and
yeah,
it's not something where I carry that grief with me and like relate back to it. Even after my friend died, and I watched this episode a million times, I never once thought I am David and Scott is Jeremy. Like never, ever, ever did I make that emotional connection,
I'm
But
glad.
yeah, because it'd be real hard to watch this episode if that's what was true. But the hat thing, I was like, yeah, that makes sense to me. Like to me, that was a perfect thing to take because it reminded me of him so specifically. And it
Hmm.
also was like a thing I could just sit on a shelf and not have to like plan around. I didn't have to like make sure it was lit at all times, like the flag or something. It
Yeah,
didn't have to be a shrine. It just I wanted something tangible, you know.
yeah.
And thankfully his mom didn't try to force Transformers on me or
Thank
something.
God.
Um, but it's just, and even having that experience in my memory, I couldn't talk to a kid who was going through this and offer them anything other than what I just told you about, that everybody's grief is their own and they're allowed to do that. Because there's just no right answer to this shit. And I think that the episode does a good job of exploring how people do this differently.
Uh-huh. I mean, it's what you just said and what all these characters were more or less saying to each other is way more than I knew at their age.
Right. I didn't
But
know it
I
at their age
also
either.
I also wasn't being told that I could grieve um
Sure.
for something. Yeah, it cuz according to everyone else, like, my dad hadn't died. So, like,
Right.
what was there to grieve?
Right.
And it's like, and I mean, this is why now, like, there are parts of that I'm still grieving cuz I was frozen.
Of course. Yeah, you don't know nobody knows how to process any of this shit when it happens to them.
And to
Like
be
people,
fair to my friends and classmates, none of them knew. I was still fairly new at that school. And, like,
uh,
I think maybe my best friend in high school knew, and he was the only one I would talk to about it. But, like,
yeah.
otherwise, people knew from the one day I missed school. And then after that, I mean, what would they have known to say? Again, no one died. No
Hmm.
one else understood at that age what a stroke was. Like,
Right.
what was there to say or do?
Right. Yeah. And I mean, and the answer is nothing, just be my friend.
Exactly. And they all did that splendidly.
Yeah. But it's this stuff is tough.
Yeah.
And it's not there's just no clear roadmap. But I think that I think the second half of the episode is like kind of the writers winning in the battle to like do something, to attempt something real emotionally with the characters that, is undercut by like the only thing that could have made it sillier is if there had been a music cue when Scott picked up the gun, like the Old West or something.
Oh my God.
Or like.
No, I'll tell you what would have
silly.
made it more ridiculous. And I've already got Walter working on this. Did you ever watch The OC?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so
We've got a plan. We've got a plan. Let's go do our plan. I love The OC.
I was never allowed to watch it, but I know of this one moment. I know of this one death because it started a whole meme of the whole what you say, like death sequence.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about? Because SNL did a thing on it.
I don't remember who died in The OC.
It doesn't matter. They started a whole meme of people dying with that song playing.
Oh, man.
And I immediately heard it in my head when they kept staying on David's reaction. And I went, Walter, your assignment for this episode. Because people have now done that with they've inserted that song into other character deaths or into like insane, wild, dramatic moments. I mean, we have one for Newsies, for crying out loud.
Yeah. So this is a question I texted you right before we got on. Is there a TV death that landed with you? And because there is one for me, and it isn't this one. It's not Scott with the silly gun twirling bullshit. It's this character that we just don't know that well, and has been on the periphery at best, a dozen times, and like we're told how weird he is because he likes country music and fireworks and guns, and then he's dead, one of their own. So it isn't this one.
No.
But what TV death landed for you?
Sybil Crawley in Downton Abbey.
Okay, I did not watch Downton Abbey, so tell me why this hits.
Devastates me. It's weird because they started that season with putting out like these two actors are leaving the show. So
isn't that always the way?
Huh?
Isn't that always the way?
It's weird. But again, so we knew they were leaving, but I didn't think they were going to kill her. And the thing is, too, they didn't just kill her. Like, I unfortunately now know what, oh God, and I need to look it up real quick. She dies in child labor. Eclampsia. Yeah.
I was going to guess preeclampsia. I was going to guess that.
Yeah. Because it's still killing people today.
Right.
But yeah, she dies in the most, maybe not the most horrible way, but this actress killed it, and herself, unfortunately. Yeah, the preeclampsia of it all is devastating. When I introduced Walter to the show, it still devastated me. So yeah, that death took me out for a bit.
Yeah. For me, it was Bobby Simone on NYPD Blue. And very much the same kind of thing, where we knew Jimmy Smits was leaving. He was going to come back, do like 6 episodes of whatever season that was, and I just hit the microphone.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not the mic's fault.
No, I bumped it. Gesticulating with no cameras on. But we knew he wasn't coming back. And so it was like, how is he going to be written off the show? And he went to the dentist and got an infection that went to his heart. Yeah. And they stretched out his illness over like 5 episodes. Like he started to feel bad, and then like he was in the hospital, and they're like, what the hell is this? And I mean, they really drew this whole thing out for 6 episodes.
Why
Because
would you do that?
it's great. Because
No.
as a drama, oh my god, it's so good.
But now
You
you've
know.
got people more afraid of the dentist than ever.
Yeah.
You've got people calling and canceling their dental appointments.
Right.
Fuck you, man.
I
You
didn't-
killed him.
I didn't blame the dentist. But I'll tell you, like, the thing about this whole storyline that still sits with me is that Sipowicz is processing this, and this did happen after my friend died. So I think I felt this in ways that I wouldn't have if I didn't have this life experience. But Sipowicz is middle aged at this point. He's in his 30s or 40s, whatever he is, and he's standing in the precinct and he's trying to hold it together. He's looking out the window, and I can't remember if they're married yet or if they're just dating or whatever. She comes up behind him. She's like the district attorney or something. And he's trying not to cry.
Mm-hmm.
And because that's not who he is. He's not tough. I mean, he's tough. He's not emotive. He doesn't show this kind of stuff. And she squeezes his arm and says, something like, "How are you doing?" And he said, and I can barely say this without crying. God damn it. Fucking Dennis Franz. He said, "I never thought I would make another friend, and now he's going to die." And it's the most heartbreaking thing I've ever heard. He's just like, what the fuck is that? Like, it still lands on me so hard. And he dies. Like, he dies 2 episodes later or whatever. And that is how you write a character dealing with the death of a friend.
Mm-hmm.
It is, I mean, and that's how you act it. Like, I don't know if Franz won the Emmy that year, but goddamn, he should have. Like, just for that. I mean, if that scene was his what they submitted, give it to him.
Yeah.
Because it was amazing. So
give him all the awards.
Yeah. And he got a lot of the awards. I just don't know if he got one for that year or not. But that's the one that still sits with me. Bobby Simone on NYPD Blue.
Wow.
So is there anything else that this episode is really about for you?
No.
All right. So who is your Steve Sanders Memorial worst person of the episode?
Scott's dad, whoever brought the gun into the house and didn't hide the key.
Yeah. I mean, he locked it. Like, that's what you're supposed to do, but he didn't do it good enough. And I guess that's what they're saying is, like, you bring this into your house, you're asking for trouble, even if you lock it away.
And, like, he tells a friend of Scott's, like, well, guns are weapons, not toys. And it's like, okay, you clearly know this. Have you made that clear to your children? Because Scott's out here acting like it's a toy. Right.
And it's fucking loaded. You left it
loaded.
Oh,
my God.
Where kids can get to it. Yeah, that is.
Yeah, he's the worst. Like, I want to say it's the mom, but some of who she is based on factors that I don't understand, but are human. So I'm going to give her that.
Yeah. I'm not.
That's fine. Someone
Mrs. Scanlon is the worst person of the episode. And here's why she is that for me. Are you or have you ever been a Howard Stern fan?
No.
Okay. So there was one of the Whack Packers, this guy, Eric the actor. And he's passed because he had a lot of health problems, this guy. And he was originally they called him Eric the Midget, but then they were like, oh, we can't say that word anymore. So, and he wanted to be an actor, so they called him Eric the actor.
Oh.
Yeah. And they got him on, like, this was a guy who, like, because of his association with the show, like, he got to, like, go to wrestling events, like, and he got to be in TV shows. Like, he got cast in parts in TV shows, like, with lines. Wow. And to, like, all of this stuff, like, these things that were, like, legitimately, like, amazing things for anyone to get to do if it's their dream. And he got them because of the show. But he was so fucking funny. because of how ungrateful and miserable and angry he was all the time. Like when they tried to cast him in, I think it was the show Fringe that they cast him in. The guy who was running the show was like, Howard, I want to do this, but he is making it so hard. Like the demands that he has to do this one day of shooting for this episode. And it was all the time with Eric. Like everything was another thing that he was pissed off about or expecting of somebody or demanding rudely or threatening to have someone murdered. like he was like, Johnny, you know what to do. Like he was so terrible as a person, which is why it was so funny to listen to him. And the reason I bring it up is because at one point, Baba Booey says that Eric has such a hard life, but he is so much of an asshole that I only almost feel bad for him. Like it is like all of the shit that this guy is dealing with, you should feel bad for him, but he's such an asshole that like I can't quite do it.
That's fair.
And that's how I feel about Mrs. Scanlon. Is from the start of this episode, she sucks. Like all of this shit she throws on David and the way she infantilizes both him and Scott, and like to the point where
let her on campus.
Right, multiple times. Just shows up.
Like, she is straight up harassing David.
She really is. So, like, she's so terrible that I almost feel bad for her that her son killed himself accidentally in her house on his 16th birthday.
Yeah.
Like, that's how terrible she is that I almost feel bad for her. And that's so awful. Yeah. And that's why, for me, Mrs. Scanlon is the worst person of the episode. And we're not done with Mrs. Scanlon. She comes back and she doesn't get better. Like she's just another example of parenting in this show, and the parents being just god awful. So yeah. So that's my we skipped.
I know, I wasn't sure if you did this on purpose, but we skipped Nostalgia Corner.
We skipped Nostalgia Corner because the segue was there so easily to.
No, it's fine.
These fucking awful people. What did this episode make you nostalgic for, dear Lord?
I have a pleasant thing.
Okay, good.
I mean, it made me nostalgic for choir, and
sure.
Granted, thankfully, we were never called up to sing at a student's funeral.
Uh-huh.
But no, I mean, I loved whenever there was any kind of event and the choir's gonna sing. Yay, I get to be up on stage and singing with my choir. This is the best because, love singing and choir nerds.
Yeah.
Forever.
That's awesome.
Love it. Yeah.
I don't know that it's proper nostalgia, but there is something about that teenage birthday party where it's like you just can't figure out what kind of party this is. Like, is it a little kid's party? Is it like a cool kids party? Like
St. Patrick's Day party?
Right. Like, what are we doing here? And like, there's just I do find the awkwardness of Scott's birthday party endearing. Yes. And it makes me nostalgic for like what kind of party is this?
It's whatever was in the house from past kids' parties because they have a lot of children, so I don't imagine they have a lot of expendable cash, and I don't know that Five and Below or the dollar stores available in 90210. So
I do like I like the, again, 90210 predicts the future. Those kids sitting on the couch playing their Game Boys.
Yeah!
It's literally everyone now at every party.
Not even just at parties. I mean, you see people at restaurants, like their kids on a thing, and I'm like, all right,
Yeah. I mean, I'm telling you, you buy 5 minutes of quiet where you can buy 5 minutes of quiet.
Yeah, again, I'm not a parent. I can't say. But I have definitely sat children I'm watching in front of the TV and have been like, great.
That's right. You guys amuse yourself. Let
Yeah.
MTV be your babysitter.
Yeah.
By the way, for kids in the 80s, MTV was a huge babysitter.
That's
Like,
astonishing to me because I feel like
I
music
mean,
videos have some pretty crazy stuff.
they do. And I wasn't like technically allowed to watch MTV when I was,
Ah,
in the 80s. But we watched it all the damn time anyway, and we're home by ourselves. Who's going to stop us? As long as when you pick up the remote and hit last channel, it doesn't go to MTV, you're safe.
I was going to say, did you also do this in your basement? Because I feel like once I was brave enough to hang out in the basement by myself, it opened up a world of I can watch whatever. I just need to be able to go to the next channel if I
Right.
hear steps on the stairs.
Oh yeah, the footsteps on the stairs are huge.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
you
how I
got to know
finally saw
what's.
all of Titanic. I was like,
You were guarded from seeing Titanic.
from certain scenes in Titanic.
Oh, just because there was bosoms?
Oh, yes. See, even Ember's mad about it.
I know.
I agree.
Ember's like,
Bosoms are amazing. Come here.
that's right. Release the bosoms.
Come here. Come here. She's so mad. She misses her dad.
I get it. I totally get it.
Yeah. And
All right,
again,
so- go ahead.
we're upset about bosoms being hidden from 9-year-old me.
I don't know. Show the bosoms. Everybody needs a bosom for a pillow. Everybody needs a bosom.
Why they have bosom buddies?
That's right. I watched that program when I was a kid too. All right, so I think we did it.
We did it. Oh my God. We got through it.
We did. We got through Scott. So you did ask a pertinent question earlier via text, which is basically, are we going to see them grieve this loss further?
Yeah.
And it will come as no surprise to you that the answer is pretty much no.
God damn it.
Yeah, it's not erased, but I'm telling you, as someone who lived this shit, you like, if this was real, in 3 years there'd be an episode where David totally breaks down because Scott died.
I mean, I feel like it at least has to be referenced at graduation in 5 years.
Right. Yeah.
However long they take.
I don't know that it is. So, like, I will say that in the next episode, you see a little bit of processing from David, but that is not what the next week's episode is about. And I cannot wait for you to watch the fucking ridiculousness of next week's episode, which is season 2, episode 15, U4EA, or Euphoria.
What?
Yeah. So, it is. I mean, it is nothing but what the fuck from start to finish.
Great.
Yeah, and not in a totally different way. So don't gird your loins for a deeply sad episode about mourning and loss and things like that. Prepare yourself for what TV writers in 1991 thought a rave looked like.
No! Yes! Oh my God. I wonder if it's any better than what they thought it looked like in Dawson's Creek. And I say thought because I myself have no idea what a rave looks like.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say not this.
Okay.
So I can't wait for you to watch Euphoria, and I can't wait to talk about it next week. We are in a run, guys. We are in a run.
Drugs. I bet there are drugs. There have to be drugs.
So we have got. I mean, the next 2 episodes are full on classics, and there are some things like I was thinking about this earlier. The episodes of 90210 that I get excited about us doing they kind of fall into one of two categories, I guess. One are ones where stuff happens that everybody talks about. And the like this one. The other are the ones where I think it is so ridiculous that it almost makes me angry.
Oh no.
Those are the ones I like the most. Those are my favorite episodes where the episode is come the fuck on like the whole time.
Nice.
And Euphoria is a come the fuck on the whole time episode, and I kind of love it. So, but we have a lot of things that I cannot wait to talk about for the rest of this season. There's a couple of dopey shits that happens in here too, but even the dopey shits are one where you're like, yeah, this is so ridiculous. I kind of want to talk about it. So,
I can't wait. Ember's already growling at how ridiculous it is.
All right. So R.I.P. Scott.
R.I.P. Scott. Barely knew ya.
That's right. But until next week, Cheesemeisters.
Bye.
Bye.